Hi. One thing that, as a teacher, I know I needed to improve on was my science. And so this is an area that Brian, first of all, I have to give a lot of credit to Brian. He really supported and helped out in our third grade classes. But one thing that we really struggled with in third grade was how to represent data and to be able to show that data in a way that the students, will be able to read it. So one thing that Brian helped us do was to create graphs using the data that the students see from their own experiments, and then be able to put that into a graph format. Brian suggested the app numbers. This is just an example of the end product. We have a lot of work to go still, but I just wanted to show you kind of how we started in the beginning. So the app is on all students' iPads. It's a district app. It's called Numbers. It's also on the MacBook, and I can use it a little bit better on the MacBook. I don't know. Some of you can probably use the app easier. But one thing that we started with was we just started putting in a table with graph data. So what we did with the first experiment, you can see the different tabs at the top. There's one up here for a pendulum swing. They had to count the number of swings based off of different variables. A catapult to see how far different things would catapult. And then we also put in a tab for their understanding about force. This was our unit on force, so that they could take some notes. They could put in information from any documents that they found and that kind of thing. So it was all kind of in one location. After we created the tables, it was just a simple, actually when you open a new file, if you go to a file and you open a new one, and I obviously just chose the default, which I shouldn't do now apparently. If you see here, the table just appears and you can make it as small or as big as you want. So we just did, for the beginning of third grade, obviously we chose smaller data, 5 trials, and then each of the kids could fill in the data. As soon as you fill in the numbers, it creates it into a bar graph format. We chose the bar graph. There are a ton of different graphs that you can do. So we started simple, and we just said, you know, the first one, so the first one, our data was, if I can get it to work here. Okay, so if I want to put in my data, I can create whatever columns that I want. Obviously, let's just say that we're doing the catapult, and I'm catapulting to see how far it goes. It goes 2 feet, 4 feet, however far, and I put in all of my data for those trials, and then I can make a graph based off of that by inserting a graph. This is really small. I don't know if you can see it. So I insert a chart here, and you can see there's a ton of different charts that you can choose if you want to compare data, whatever. And then the charts, you can change the color, every other thing in the world that you want. You want to add the chart data, so the easiest thing is to put in the data first, and then you add the chart data, and you highlight the columns that you want it to use. So I'm going to start with this column, and then if I had more data in the other column, I would choose that as well. And then it shows you exactly on the graph line here. Now if you choose the graph, you can also put a title, a border, a legend. Obviously I don't have a legend, but if I typed in here distance, it automatically appears on my graphing so that the kids can see it. There's also a lot of different ways that you can compare it. So if you say that you change the mass from each of the trials, then you can also see that data right next to it. So if I change the mass on it, if it was a mass of 5 grams or whatever it was, and however far it went, and then I can add that data to my graph by selecting that also. And then it adds in a different column. You can change the columns, the axis, whatever you want over here. But I just found this a really, really neat way for third graders to see the patterns that the different things are doing, whatever experiment it is, and they were very easily able to predict in the future. So if my numbers keep going this way, if I keep having more distance with less weight, obviously the less weight that I get, the more distance I'll continue to get. So it was really cool for them to be able to predict, and then to also write different inferences that they had based off of the experiment.